If you find yourself interested in doing electronics, you'll need a few tools to get yourself started. In this video, I'll go over some basic tools and supplies you need to get started. There will be more tools you'll need as you go along, but you'll accumulate them as needed. One of the most used tools when assembling, repairing, or modifying almost any electronics device is the screwdriver. They come in many different types, and with electronics you'll need a lot of them. I recommend getting a screwdriver set such as the one from iFixit. It comes with a screwdriver handle as well as many different interchangeable bits to help you get into most anything. You'll often need to pick up and move things that are either too small or too hot to grab with your bare hands. That's where various types of pliers come in. Most handy though are the needle nose pliers. They're more precise than some of the other types, which is usually an important factor in dealing with small electronics components. There are a million uses for pliers, and you'll inevitably come across all of them as you work on more and more projects. A more precise way to pick up small components is a good pair of tweezers. These can be found very cheaply, and they come in all kinds of varieties for whatever job you need done. You'll very often find the need to cut wire and other wiry things in electronics. To do this, you'll need a pair of some kind of cutters. The one I use is this flush cut pair. This type is the most optimal for doing electronics work because you can cut component leads very close to the boards they're soldered to. There are seemingly endless types of cutters which all perform their own specific type of cut, and you can even use scissors if you feel so inclined. In order to solder wires to other wires and other things, you'll need to expose some of the wire's bare metal. This is a simple task made easy by the use of automatic wire strippers like these. You can even use manual wire strippers, but it'd be easier just to not do that. You can even use a pair of wire cutters to strip wire, which is what I usually do. Of course, the soldering iron is one of, if not the most important electronics tools for working on electronics. It allows you to bond components with boards, wires, and other components. They don't have to be expensive, they're simply a heated stick. The soldering iron I recommend is the Hakko FX888D. It's excellent, affordable iron. It would also be wise to get a set of different tips for your iron because different types of components require different sizes and shapes of tips. Because you can't see voltage or current, you need a multimeter to see them for you. There are two types of multimeter, automatic and manual. Don't bother with manual these days, automatics are much easier to use and often easier to find as well. I recommend getting two multimeters just in case you have to measure voltage and current at the same time. I also recommend a good clamp meter like this Unity. It allows you to measure current simply by clamping around a wire. It's not essential, but it's nice to have. A good affordable meter I recommend is the X-Tech EX330. It's the one I've been using and it's great. A more visual way to see voltages in a circuit is by using a tool known as the oscilloscope. Simply connect the ground wire to a ground point in your circuit and use the probe with the hook tip to connect the various points in your circuit to see what's going on there. By doing this, you can see the voltage on the volts versus time graph. You can use a digital oscilloscope, which is what I recommend, but if you want to save a buck, you can get with an old-fashioned analog oscilloscope. When cutting out component holes on plastic enclosure or modifying a part to fit something that it's not intended to go to, there's nothing quite like a rotary tool, otherwise known as a Dremel. These are simply motors with variable speed in which various types of bits can be fitted to. They can cut, sand, shape, grind, really whatever it takes to do what you need done. The one I have is this cheap off-brand I found on eBay for like $16. A function generator allows you to inject a frequency of your choice of waveform into a circuit. This is often necessary for testing and debugging all kinds of circuits. I often use mine for testing amplifiers and filters. In order to test the circuit you just made, you'll need to power it up. This can be easily done by having a benchtop power supply. While using one of these, you can vary the voltage and often set a current limit if you're afraid of burning up your cheap capacitors. These are relatively simple to make if you don't want to buy a commercial one. To accurately measure precise thicknesses of materials like sheet metal, component leads, and stuff like that, a pair of calipers are required. These have three ways to measure stuff and can be set to read out either metric or imperial measurements. As you should know, the drill is most frequently used to drill holes. This will come up time and time again to mount switches, potentiometers, and near infinite amount of component types to enclosures. If you don't have one, you may as well get one, because you'll need it for electronics and non-electronic projects in the future. The cheapest one at Lowe's will do just fine. Also, to go with that, it's a good idea to get a simple set of bits. This is the one I got. It's cheap, but it works. To go with that new soldering iron, go ahead and get a couple rolls of solder. For electronics, you want relatively thin solder, preferably under a diameter of 1 mm with a rosin core. This is very easy to find anywhere that sells electronic supplies. When you have an idea you want to try it real quick, or you just want to mess around, a breadboard is what you'll want to use. Breadboards are great because they can quickly build virtually any circuit and test it out quickly without the need to solder. Just push the component leads into the holes of the breadboard. There are underlying connections in the breadboard that connect the holes of the board together in a specific way. You can use these along with some breadboard-friendly jumpers to make all the connections you need, and when you're done, you can just pull it all off, and that's it. When you're sure your circuit's all good and working, it's time to solder it to a more permanent medium than your breadboard. At this point, you can etch a PCB, use a perf board, or use a strip board. Perf boards are boards with a bunch of holes in it to put component leads through. Each hole has copper plating around it so it can be soldered to. And to make connections between components, you have to use wire or use the component lead to make some connections. Strip board is like perf board, but all the holes in each row is connected to each other, and you can use the cutting tool to cut traces short if you need to. I prefer perf board because you have more freedom in how you can lay out your board. You'll need to keep probes for all your instruments on hand so you can actually use them. I could keep multimeter and oscilloscope probes on hand at all times. It's also a good idea to have a collection of jumpers, such as breadboard jumpers, alligator clips, hookup wire, and so on. Those are just some very basic tools you need to make a usable electronics lab. There are countless more tools and supplies that you'll end up with depending on what type of project you work on most. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.